There was a time when there were no such thing as casting directors, where directors would call their friends, they'd call stage managers, but as more theater started happening, it became bigger, there were bigger musicals, that kind of thing. You know, the need for somebody to filter through all of the actors, because there are so many actors. It began, I think, probably in earnest in the 60s. There was no real training for it. It was just people who knew the acting pool who would start to narrow it down and present it to the directors and the producers so that it became a more manageable task. I think that part of the reason it's very necessary now is just the overwhelming number of people who want to be actors. And also, particularly in the theater, you know, it requires some skill to get people to actually commit to theater if they have a career in film and television. And it requires real doggedness to get them to look at things and to get their representatives to take projects seriously, because it's not the huge paying work that, you know, television or film is. There's a lot of persuasion. There's a lot of representing the material and the creative team that you are working with, and trying to convince people, and not just convince, but trying to help them see it, and trying to help them see how it would be beneficial for their client to be seen in it. We go to the theater all the time. We watch people's work. We go to showcases. I mean, this is showcase season right now, and you know, and every single you know, university, and they're all doing their presentations. So when somebody is just out of school, that's when I first have my first real encounter with them, which is their presentation, you know, and they, hopefully most of them will get representation and agents from that. And I do a whole bunch of what we call pre-reads, which is just me. No director. I give them the scenes, I give them the play, and hope and pray that they're smart enough to actually read the whole play so that they're not just acting the scene out of context. You know, and they work with me. And I get a sense of whether or not they're really grounded, whether they're doing the work, whether they're making the choices, and whether they're ready to be presented to a director. Okay. So that's really the route from when you're just out of school. When you've been around a bit, it's because I've seen your work. The agents will send me stuff, and the agents will talk to me about things. I also get tons of unsolicited pictures and resumes. Sometimes I'll go through them. Sometimes I see people in classes. I'll do a seminar. I use YouTube. A lot of people do their tapes and they put them up through YouTube. It's kind of interesting to me because it means the whole wide world can see them, but I guess you'd have to know what to look for. You know, and they do, there's also Vimeo, and you send it, and all these different things. But yeah, we look at tape, and generally we don't cast from tape. Tape is usually a way for us to say, okay, now we really need to see you, so we will pay to fly you in. I almost always wind up having open calls for children, because kids, you know, young performers, you have no idea who they are, where they are in their development. It changes from day to day. And many young actors don't have agents. So you wind up having open calls. You know, for a show like Dirty Dancing, for instance, we had tons of open calls. Because what we were looking for was so specific. You know, either from the dancers, because, you know, like the ballroom dancers, that's not something that, you know, the agencies don't go, oh yeah, I've got this great ballroom couple for you. It doesn't generally happen that way. So the harder and the more specific the character, the more likely there will be an open call. A Broadway show is usually 6 months to a year. Sometimes I've cast things in 2 days, you know, because that's all you have with the creative staff. You know, they're only here from Texas or from Philadelphia or from someplace that we've got 2 days. That's when we have to do it. Now, I do a lot of work prior to that. You know, I do pre-reads. You know, if it's hard to cast. Sometimes it takes longer because people get other jobs and they back out at the last minute. You know, you have to roll with the punches. I probably get between 200 and 300 emails a day that I have to respond to, from producers, from directors, from actors that I'm actively trying to get on tape, from agents, from managers, you know, from pick someone. So So to get unsolicited emails it's just something I can't respond to.
Okay.
And actually, I kind of feel like I didn't give you my email address. We have the company email address, so people can send things there and say, I just, I love the stuff you cast. I thought this was amazing. I really want to be in your files. That's fine. I'd rather it go to the general address. Like, for instance, sometimes with these presentations, either because people are smart and they just figure out what my email address is, or, something, they send me an email saying, thanks so much for coming, and here's my materials, and all I do is forward it to someone else. I don't deal with that. I remember the people who are good. And once you've worked with me once, I generally remember you always. But I think anybody will tell you, even I think scientists will tell you that some things are not really set in your brain until you see it or hear it the third time. With an actor, I can look at this young woman's resume, and I saw her in her showcase, and then I saw her in a show, and now I'm looking at her resume. Is that the third time? Probably not. It probably has to be 3 times in person. I know it just happened at the theater festival I was just at the Actors Theater of Louisville, with an actor who had to be released and replaced. And it's never easy. And it's very hard to make a judgment about an actor in those circumstances. I think sometimes there are times when people should have been released, and they haven't been because people are squeamish about it. But it's a funny industry. It's not like hiring somebody to be an accountant, and as long as they do the math right, they're doing the job right. It's not the same, because it's about equality. It's about a way of working. It's about rapport with the director. It's about language skills and being able to do things that can be very, very specific. And sometimes it's just not the right mix, and it doesn't mean that the actor is a bad actor, or it just means that this is the wrong fit. My favorite way to do this is to sit down with somebody and have lunch and talk about the project before we begin to work. So I know what they're looking for. I know what their vision of the piece is. Because, particularly if you're dealing with classic theater, people will have a different idea.
Of course.
They're going to do Macbeth in the 60s in a warehouse, in the Flower, in Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. You never know what somebody's idea is. It doesn't always work that way, either because the director's not in New York. They may be someplace else. They may be busy rehearsing something else. They may not think it's important. They may think it's obvious. It's about the personality of the director. If you get to have that luncheon, if you get to have that time talking about the play and what they're really looking for, it's a real help. In those cases, when the director doesn't have time to sit down and talk with you, when they haven't talked with you, it's either because they haven't had time or because they simply have not figured out what they are looking for. And many directors use the audition process to figure it out, and to learn about the play. And some of them aren't ashamed of saying it, and I think it's a perfectly valid way to learn about, particularly about a new play. You learn about the play by hearing it, right? And hearing it with different interpretations. But it does help if someone has thought about it a bit and can share what their thoughts are with you. I actually have really terrific relationships with producers. Because I'm efficient, and I think I communicate well. It depends on who people are in New York. There's lead producers, there are groups of investors. I mean, generally my relationship is really only with the lead producer. But I know an enormous number of people in New York, who were investors on one show and then turn into a lead producer on another. They generally don't make the choice of who the casting director is. Generally, it's the director who chooses. For a producer, the thing that's really important, I think, is that you don't waste their time. This is something I don't think actors understand, particularly about Broadway. That a casting decision on Broadway is an expensive one, particularly if it's a musical. Because you need to think about it. There's the costumes, there's everything that's designed for, even if it's this one person in the ensemble. And to make the wrong choice is a costly choice. So I think what producers appreciate is that you've done the groundwork, You've looked at everybody. You've only presented the people that the director really should see. They're people with good track records. They're reliable. There's not somebody has a drug problem or is going to take a powder on you or has a complicated emotional life and won't be able to show up at the theater on time, you know, because nobody wants to fire anybody. And it can be a very expensive process, particularly on, you know, here, and I'm sure that this is different in Paris, you know, the contracts here are very specific. It's very difficult to fire an actor on Broadway. So when you hire that person and you have a hit show like Cats or something, they could be in the show for 20 years. So you better make sure you really like that person. Most of the managers I deal with are terrific, and they really do care about their clients' careers, and if their client wants to do theater, they'll make sure that they get to. You know, agenting and managing has changed. And it's changed since I began doing this. I mean, I would say in the last 15 years it's changed. What it is to be an agent has changed exponentially. The smaller agents are still very much in the business of building a career and developing an artist. The bigger ones like CAA, ICM, UTA, WME are not. They are not in the business of developing an artist. They are managing offers, they're fielding offers, they're negotiating money and sponsorships and all this kind of stuff. When you're dealing with somebody who has a major agent, I go to the manager first whenever I can because they talk to the client. I like it when an actor has ease, when they're easy in themselves, when they know who they are, they walk into a room, they're self-possessed. They've done the work, you know, they've prepared for the audition, but they're easy. That's, I think, what we are always looking for are people who understand who they are and who walk in and are able to say, well, this is my work today, and I'm doing my work and I'm a professional. And and it's just, it's ease. Somebody walks in and they know who they are. It's different from a star's point of view than it is from a young actor's point of view. I mean, generally stars they've gotten to where they are because they are comfortable, because they have this kind of ease and they put other people at ease.
As well.
To a young actor, I would say, you know, understand what it is you want to do in that audition. You know, make your choices, know what it is you want to do. You know, I've done the work. Prepare yourself, think about, you know, and just go at it creatively. I think so many times what happens with young actors is that they're afraid to invest in the material because they're afraid if they don't get it, it'll really hurt. And so they don't take all the time they need to do the work. But if they did, they're much more likely to get the job. And the fact of the matter is, you know, the goal of an audition is not necessarily to get the job. The goal is to impress me in a good way so that I bring you in the next time.
To add something else?
Just kiss.
Thank you very much, Laura.
Oh, you're welcome. Please stop.